This is a story I never thought I'd be telling, especially not here, but I need to get this off my chest before I lose my mind. I'm Ethan, a 36-year-old operations manager in Columbus, Ohio. In my line of work, everything is about patterns, efficiency, and data. If a machine is vibrating 3 decibels higher than it should, I notice. If a shipment is 4 minutes late, I'm on the phone. My life is built on recognizing when something is off. I thought my 10-year marriage to Megan was a rock-solid investment, a closed loop of trust and partnership. But about 6 months ago, the data points started shifting. It began with the late nights. Megan works in pharmaceutical sales, a high-pressure job, sure, but suddenly, her client dinners jumped from once a week to 3 or 4. She'd come home smelling like expensive gin and wood smoke, her eyes bright with a kind of nervous energy I hadn't seen in years. She started keeping her phone face down on every surface, the brightness dimmed so low it was like she was staring into a black hole. When she did look at it, she'd get these little butterflies in her expression, that soft, dreamy smile she used to reserve only for me during our honeymoon. My gut didn't just twist, it sounded a full-scale industrial alarm. I knew the matrix of our marriage had a glitch, and I was about to find out exactly how deep the corruption went. I've always been called Mr. Spreadsheet at the office. My brain naturally categorizes everything into columns of optimal and anomaly. And let me tell you, by month 4 of this new Megan, the anomalies were off the charts. First, there was the physical optimization phase. Megan had always been fit, but suddenly she doubled her gym visits. She was hitting the squat rack 5 days a week and started getting her hair done every 3 weeks instead of her usual 6. Then came the wardrobe. I'd be folding laundry and find lace bodysuits and silk sets I'd never seen before, items that certainly weren't being debuted for me in the bedroom. When I asked about them, she'd just roll her eyes and say, "God, Ethan, I'm allowed to buy things for myself, right? Stop being so controlling." That was the second red flag, the manufactured conflict. It was like she was following a script to make me the bad guy. I'd leave a single fork in the sink, and she'd launch into a 20-minute screaming match about how I didn't respect her labor, and how stifled she felt in this house. She was picking fights over towels, the way I'd parked the car, even the way I breathed while we watched TV. At work, we call this creating a justification for a system failure. She was building a case to leave me so she wouldn't have to feel like the villain. My heart was shaking every time she walked into the room, wondering which "Ethan is a monster" card she was going to pull next. I didn't have the smoking gun yet, but the data was screaming. My wife was auditioning for a new life, and I was being phased out of the production. By the 5th month, the atmosphere in our house was toxic. I felt like a stranger in my own living room. Every time I tried to touch her shoulder or offer a hug, Megan would flinch as if I were covered in something sour. "I just need space, Ethan. You're so suffocating," she'd snap, before grabbing her bag and heading out for another emergency strategy session with her team. But I'm an operations manager. I don't guess, I verify. One Tuesday night, she claimed she was at her best friend Brooke's house for a girls' night, to decompress from my emotional demands. I sat in my home office, staring at my phone. We'd had Find My Friends active for years, mostly for safety when she traveled for work. I pulled it up, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the device. The little glowing dot wasn't at Brooke's. It was sitting stationary in a quiet, upscale suburb on the other side of Columbus. A place she had no business being. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I opened a fresh spreadsheet on my second monitor. I logged the coordinates. Then I used my premium access to property records, a tool I usually use for logistics planning, to look up the deed for that specific address. The owner, Bradley Holt. Age 41. Senior VP at a rival pharma firm. My stomach did a slow, sickening somersault. This wasn't just a fling. This was a calculated move. Bradley was everything she told me I wasn't. High status. wealthy, and apparently, the man she was auditioning for. My wife wasn't working late. She was building a nest with a stranger while I was at home wondering if I'd forgotten to take the trash out. I looked at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes, and felt a cold, hard clarity settle over me. The marriage wasn't just failing, it was being liquidated. The break finally happened on a Sunday afternoon. The air in the kitchen was so thick you could have sliced it with a steak knife. I was sitting at the table, scrolling through my Bradley Holt file on my laptop, when Megan walked in. She wasn't wearing her usual Sunday sweats. She was dressed in an expensive wrap dress, her hair blown out perfectly, and she was carrying a suitcase. "Ethan, we need to talk," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "I've been thinking a lot about us. About how stifled I feel. I think I need a break. Just some time apart to find myself again." My heart sank, not because I was surprised, but because of the sheer audacity of her delivery. She looked me dead in the eye and lied with the precision of a surgeon. She told me she was going to stay with a friend from the gym for a few weeks to clear her head. She even had the nerve to say, "I just don't want to lose us, you know? But I can't breathe here right now." In the world of logistics, we call this a temporary diversion. It's what you do when you're testing a new supply chain but aren't ready to decommission the old one yet. She wanted to move in with Bradley, see if his V-level lifestyle suited her, and keep me sitting in our house like a loyal dog, waiting for her to come back if things didn't work out. I was her plan B. "A break, huh?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the roaring in my ears. "And where exactly is this friend's house? Does it matter?" she snapped, the mask slipping for a second. "You're already being interrogative. This is exactly why I need to leave. I'll text you in a few days. Don't try to follow me, Ethan. I need my space." I watched from the window as she loaded the rest of her bags into her SUV. She didn't look back once. As soon as her taillights faded, I pulled up the tracking app. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. There it was. The little blue dot didn't go to the gym, and it didn't go to Brooks. It pulled right into Bradley Holt's driveway and stayed there. She wasn't finding herself. She was auditioning my replacement. But what Megan didn't realize is that once a system is flagged for terminal failure, I don't wait and see. I liquidate. As soon as the garage door clicked shut, the husband in me died, and the operations manager took full control. I didn't cry. I didn't smash a glass. I walked straight to my home office, sat down, and opened a file I'd been quietly building for weeks. In business, when a partnership becomes a liability, you don't wait and see. You execute a cold exit. I called my attorney, Marcus, at 8 p.m. on a Sunday. He's a shark, the kind of guy who bills by the minute and enjoys every second of it. "Ethan? It's late," Marcus said, his voice gravelly. She left, Marcus. She called it a break to find herself, but she's at Bradley Holt's house right now. I have the GPS logs, the property records, and the credit card statements for the lingerie she bought 3 weeks ago. I want the papers drafted by morning. You don't want to try mediation? Marcus asked, though I could hear him already typing. No. She thinks I'm the backup plan. She thinks she can test drive a life with a VP and come back to her boring husband if the new engine stalls. I'm decommissioning the entire project. I want her served at Holt's address. Not her office, not Brooks' house. I want the papers delivered to his front door while they're having their new life breakfast. I spent the rest of the night doing a full audit. I moved half of our liquid assets into a separate holding account, perfectly legal in our state as long as it's documented for the final split. I changed the passcodes on the smart home system. I even canceled her seat on our shared streaming accounts. It sounds petty, but in a system overhaul, you remove all unauthorized users immediately. I was shaking, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands were steady as I logged every anomaly. Megan thought she was playing a game of hide and seek. She didn't realize I was playing a game of corporate liquidation. The next morning, the victim campaign officially launched. My phone buzzed on the nightstand at 7:15 a.m. It was a text from Megan. Megan, I barely slept last night. This is so hard for me, Ethan. I hope you're reflecting on why I had to leave. I just need you to be better if we're ever going to make this work. Please don't make this difficult. I stared at the screen. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. She was literally lying in another man's bed, probably in the silk sheets I'd found in the laundry, typing out a message about how I needed to be better. It was a classic gaslighting tactic: keep the backup feeling guilty so he stays compliant and waiting. I didn't reply. In my world, you don't argue with a failing vendor, you just terminate the contract. Instead, I spent the morning at the bank. I walked in, sat down with the manager, and began the process of separating our lives. I wasn't being cruel, I was being precise. I took exactly 50% of our joint savings. Not a penny more, not a penny less. I didn't want a judge to see any retaliatory behavior. Everything had to be by the book. By noon, I was sitting in my lawyer's office. Marcus looked over the file I'd compiled, the GPS logs, the photos of her car at Bradley's at 3 a.m., the credit card statements for client dinners that were actually high-end jewelry stores. You're very thorough, Ethan, Marcus said, leaning back in his leather chair. Most guys in your position are a mess. They're begging for their wives to come back. You're different. I'm an operations manager, Marcus, I said, my voice cold and flat. When a system is this compromised, you don't patch it. You replace it. Is the server ready? He nodded. A deputy is on his way to Bradley Holt's address as we speak. She should be served within the hour. I felt a surge of something, not joy, but a grim satisfaction. Megan wanted a break? Fine. I was giving her a permanent one. She wanted to find herself? She was about to find herself standing on a porch in front of a process server while her lover watched. It was 2:14 p.m. on a Wednesday. I was sitting in my car in a quiet park, staring at the GPS dot on my phone. The dot, Megan's phone, was still at Bradley Holt's house. I'd been watching it like a hawk for hours. It was a strange, cold sensation, watching the person you'd shared 10 years with living a completely different life in real time. Suddenly, my phone exploded. Not a text. A call. Megan. I let it ring. Then another. Megan. Then a flurry of texts. Megan, Ethan. What the heck is this? Megan, pick up your phone right now. You are being completely insane. Megan, who do you think you are? Serving me papers at a friend's house? I waited exactly 5 minutes, long enough for the shock to settle into her bones, but not long enough for her to craft a coherent lie. Then I picked up. Ethan! Are you out of your mind? Her voice shrieked through the speakers. She sounded hysterical, breathless. I could hear the wind in the background. She was outside. Probably on Bradley's porch, clutching the blue folder the sheriff's deputy had just handed her. A divorce? We're on a break. I told you I needed time to think. You can't do this. The break is over, Megan, I said. My voice was so calm it surprised even me. I did some thinking of my own. I looked at the data, I looked at the anomalies, and I realized the system is beyond repair. You aren't finding yourself at a friend's house. You're living with Bradley Holt. I have the GPS logs, the photos, and the address. You're served. Welcome to the break you wanted. Bradley is he's a mentor. He's helping me through this, she stammered, her voice cracking. You're stalking me? You're tracking my phone? That is so typical of you, Ethan. This is why I left. You're a control freak. Call it what you want, I replied. But while you were mentoring with Bradley, I was meeting with Marcus. The locks are changed. Your essential items are in 3 boxes at Brooks' house. Everything else stays until the court decides. Don't come to the house, Megan. You don't live here anymore. The silence on the other end was heavy. I could almost hear her brain trying to find a way to flip the script, to make me the villain again. But for the first time in 10 years, the Mr. Spreadsheet she mocked had used his skills to delete her from the equation. The boom had landed, but Megan wasn't going down without a fight. In her world, if she couldn't win on the facts, she'd win on the narrative. She spent the next 48 hours launching a full-scale social PR campaign to paint me as a controlling, emotionally abusive husband who had abandoned his wife the moment she asked for a little breathing room. My phone started blowing up with messages from mutual friends. "Ethan, what are you doing? Megan is devastated. She said you kicked her out onto the street because she wanted a week of space? Bro, serving her at a friend's house. That's cold, man. She's staying with a colleague because she felt unsafe with your temper. She was good. She'd managed to turn her test drive with Bradley into a refuge from my supposed tyranny. But Megan forgot one crucial thing. I don't just keep spreadsheets on logistics. I keep receipts on life." The breaking point was a call from my mother-in-law, Linda. Linda and I had always been close, but she sounded like she was mourning a death. "Ethan, how could you? Megan told me everything. She said you've been tracking her like an animal and that you emptied the bank accounts. She has nothing. She's sleeping on a couch, Ethan." I took a deep breath. "Linda, I'm going to send you a PDF. I want you to look at the timestamps and the addresses before you say another word." I sent her the Bradley Holt dossier. It contained the GPS log showing Megan arriving at Bradley's house at 6 p.m. on Sunday, the same day she left, and her car staying there until 8 a.m. every single morning. It had the property records for the house, which was a 5,000-square-foot mansion with a pool, not exactly a couch to crash on. It also had the credit card statement for the $400 lace lingerie set she bought while we were still happily married. There was a long, agonizing silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Linda's ragged breathing. She told me she was staying with Brooke," Linda whispered, her voice trembling. "She told me she was terrified of you. She's at 412 Oak Lane, Linda. Bradley Holt's house. Check the GPS yourself if you don't believe me. She didn't leave because she was scared. She left because she had a better offer, and she wanted me to keep the lights on in case it fell through." The victim campaign didn't just stall, it imploded. By that evening, the flying monkeys she'd sent to harass me had gone silent. My cold exit wasn't just about the law, it was about the truth. And the truth was a data point Megan couldn't manipulate. The first court date was a masterpiece of delusion. I sat on one side of the mahogany table with Marcus, my lawyer, who was calmly tapping a pen against a yellow legal pad. On the other side sat Megan, looking every bit the wronged woman, in a modest navy suit and pearls she hadn't worn in years. Next to her was her attorney, a guy named Henderson who looked like he specialized in scorched earth tactics. "Your Honor," Henderson began, his voice booming as if he were in a movie, "my client is in a state of absolute financial shock. Mr. Miller here unilaterally drained their joint accounts and changed the locks on the marital residence while my client was merely taking a brief, much-needed mental health break. She has been forced to live out of suitcases. We are requesting temporary spousal support in the amount of $2,000 per month just to cover her basic living expenses while she navigates this sudden abandonment." I almost laughed. I really did. I leaned over to Marcus and whispered, "Basic living expenses? Bradley's house has a heated infinity pool." Marcus didn't even blink. He stood up and slid a thick manila folder across the table to the judge. "Your Honor, we'd like to address the living out of suitcases narrative. My client didn't abandon Mrs. Miller. Mrs. Miller vacated the home to move directly into the residence of Mr. Bradley Holt, a senior VP at a rival pharmaceutical firm with an annual income exceeding $350,000. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Miller, no relation, luckily, flipped through the pages. "We have GPS data," Marcus continued, "showing Mrs. Miller's vehicle at Mr. Holt's residence every single night since the break began. We also have social media posts, now deleted, but archived here, showing Mrs. Miller and Mr. Holt at a high-end steakhouse the night before she requested this break. As for the drained accounts, my client took exactly 50% of the liquid assets, as is his right, and has provided a full ledger of every penny moved. He isn't starving her, he's just stopped subsidizing her affair. The judge looked over her glasses at Megan. Mrs. Miller, are you currently residing at 412 Oak Lane? Megan's face went a shade of red I didn't know existed. I'm staying there temporarily, yes, but it's just because I had nowhere else to go. At your lover's 5,000 square foot mansion? The judge asked, her voice dry as a bone. Request for temporary spousal support is denied. We'll move straight to the discovery phase for the property division. And Mrs. Miller? I suggest you stop referring to an affair as a mental health break in this courtroom. It's insulting to the bench. The boom was echoing now. Megan looked at me, her eyes filled with a pure, cold fury, but for the first time in a decade, I felt absolutely nothing. The data didn't lie, and neither did the judge. The high from the courtroom didn't last long, because the reality of our shared assets was the next line item on my liquidation spreadsheet. The crown jewel of our 10-year marriage was a 4-bedroom colonial in a quiet, leafy suburb of Columbus. We had $218,000 in equity sitting in those walls that used to echo with laughter and are now silent, save for the hum of the HVAC system I'd meticulously maintained. Megan, in her typical "have your cake and eat it too" fashion, decided she wanted the house. I deserve the home, Ethan. She spat during our first mediation session. You're the one who turned into a robot and threw me out. I need stability. I'll buy you out. I leaned back, clicking my pen. With what, Megan? Your salary is great for a single person, but the mortgage, the taxes, and the upkeep on this place require a dual income. Or is Bradley going to co-sign? Her face contorted. Bradley, as it turned out, was a senior VP, who liked his bachelor lifestyle and his high-rise condo. He had no interest in moving into a suburban family home filled with the ghosts of another man's marriage. He was a fun guy, not a fix the leaky faucet guy. I'll get financing, she insisted. I gave her 30 days. I knew the numbers better than she did. I knew her debt-to-income ratio, her car payment, and her penchant for $200 Sunday brunches. I waited. On day 31, her lawyer sent a sheepish email. Client was unable to secure a mortgage in her name alone. System failure. I whispered to the empty living room. I forced the sale. I didn't care about holding on to memories. I wanted the capital. We put the house on the market, and because I'd kept it in pristine operational condition, it sold in 4 days. After the commissions and fees, we were looking at a clean $218,000. The closing was the most clinical experience of my life. We sat in a sterile conference room, signing paper after paper. When the final check was cut, the closer handed us each a draft for $109,000. Megan stared at her check like it was a death warrant. To her, it was the end of her Queen of the Suburbs era. To me, it was the exit capital I needed to reboot my life. She tried to catch my eye as we walked to the parking lot, her lip trembling. Is this really it, Ethan? 10 years for a piece of paper and a check? No, Megan, I said, unlocking my car. 10 years of data. I just finally learned how to read it. I drove away without looking back, leaving her standing in the gravel, clutching a 6-figure check that couldn't buy back the trust she'd incinerated. While I was busy setting up my new life in a sleek, high-efficiency apartment downtown, Megan's fairy tale with Bradley was hitting its first major bottleneck. See, in my professional life, I deal with stress testing. You take a system that looks perfect under ideal conditions and you apply pressure until the seams start to show. Megan's affair with Bradley was an ideal condition system. It was built on expensive dinners, secret hotel rooms, and the thrill of the forbidden. It wasn't built for the mundane reality of Tuesday nights and dirty laundry. The first crack appeared when Megan actually moved her life into Bradley's bachelor pad. My operatives, otherwise known as the few mutual friends who hadn't been blocked, started reporting back. Bradley, the high-flying VP, wasn't used to sharing his space. He liked his minimalist aesthetic, and suddenly Megan was there with her 3 suitcases, her skincare products cluttering his marble counters, and her emotional baggage. But the real boom happened about a month into her stay. Apparently, Bradley sat her down at his breakfast bar and handed her a contribution agreement. He didn't call it rent, because that would be too transactional for a soulmate, but he wanted her to start covering a third of the mortgage, the utilities, and the maid's service. Megan was horrified. She called her sister, sobbing that Bradley was being cold and calculating, which is hilarious, considering she used to call me a robot for asking her to help with the grocery budget. She'd gone from a husband who paid 70% of the bills and handled all the logistics of life to a boyfriend who viewed her as a high-maintenance subtenant. She had the $109,000 from the house sale, but she was burning through it at an unsustainable rate. She bought a new car, a European crossover she couldn't afford to service, and a wardrobe of "I'm single and thriving" clothes. She was trying to buy the feeling of being optimal, but her bank statement was a sea of red ink. The butterflies were dead. The romance had become a business arrangement, and Megan was realizing she traded a secure, long-term partnership for a short-term lease with a very demanding landlord. In my line of work, we have KPIs, key performance indicators. If your numbers drop 2 quarters in a row, you're on a performance improvement plan. If they drop a third, you're out. It turns out, Megan's personal life was finally bleeding into her professional one. She was in pharma sales, a job that requires high energy and a perfect image. But between the legal battles, moving into Bradley's bachelor pad, and the constant friction of their failing romance, her metrics tanked. I heard through the grapevine that she missed a major regional conference because she and Bradley were having a screaming match over who left the balcony door open. Even worse? Bradley worked for a rival firm. People started whispering about conflicts of interest. Then came the night of the glitch. At 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, my phone lit up. I usually keep it on Do Not Disturb, but I'd forgotten to toggle it after a late-night call with a vendor in Singapore. Megan. Ethan, are you awake? I'm sitting in the kitchen and everything is so quiet. I keep expecting to hear you grinding coffee in the morning. Bradley is so loud, and he doesn't understand me like you do. I think we rushed into the legal stuff. Can we just talk? For old time's sake? I stared at the glowing text. 6 months ago, this would have destroyed me. I would have run to her. But now, I saw it for what it was, a low-resource emergency signal. She wasn't missing me, she was missing the stability, the 70% of the bills I paid, and the man who didn't charge her rent to exist in his space. I didn't type a single word. I didn't even read it. I just took a screenshot for Marcus, just in case she tried to claim I was the one harassing her later, and then I hit delete. The system was offline. There was no old-time sake for a ghost. The downward spiral didn't just happen, it was a total critical system failure. 3 weeks after I deleted that desperate 2 a.m. text, the news hit the grapevine like a lead weight. Megan was fired. In the pharmaceutical world, your reputation is your currency, and Megan had spent hers like she was playing with Monopoly money. Between the rumors about her and Bradley, the rival VP, and her sales numbers plummeting into the basement, her company decided she was a reputational liability. They escorted her out of the building with her desk in a cardboard box. This was the ultimate stress test for her and Bradley. In her head, this was the moment her soulmate would step up, wrap her in his arms, and tell her that his VP salary would carry them both. But Bradley Holt didn't get to be a VP by being a sentimentalist. He was a guy who collected high-value assets. And an unemployed, depressed woman with an impending divorce and a messy reputation? That was a depreciating asset. The breakup was legendary. Apparently, Megan came home crying about her job, and Bradley's response wasn't, "How can I help?" It was, "How are you going to pay your share of the maid service now?" A week later she was out. Not into another mansion, and not back into our old house. She used a chunk of her remaining house sale cash to put a deposit on a 500 square foot studio apartment in a part of town she used to call sketchy. No pool, no marble counters, no V-level lifestyle. Just a single room and the sound of her neighbors' TVs through the thin walls. I heard through Brooke, who had finally had enough of Megan's victim monologues, that Megan was spending her days in bed, scrolling through my social media from a burner account, watching me thrive. I was posting photos of my new mountain bike, my promotion to senior operations director, and the clean, minimalist life I'd built. I was an optimized machine. She was a system that had crashed so hard even the backup files were corrupted. The final, logistics, check for Megan's old life came from the most unexpected source, her own mother. Linda had always been the emotional core of Megan's world, the person Megan went to whenever she needed her ego stroked or a loan that would never be repaid. But after I sent Linda that PDF, the dossier of deceit, things had been quiet. I assumed Linda had eventually succumbed to Megan's tears. I was wrong. My phone rang on a Saturday morning. It was Linda. Her voice sounded different, not angry, just exhausted. "Ethan," she said softly. "I went to see her. In that apartment." I stayed silent, let the data flow. "She spent 3 hours telling me how you engineered her downfall," Linda continued, a bitter laugh escaping her. "She told me you hacked her company to get her fired and that you bribed the judge. She actually asked me for $20,000 from my retirement fund to get back on her feet so she could sue you for emotional distress." "And what did you say, Linda?" I asked her one question, "Where is Bradley?" Linda's voice cracked. And she started screaming. She called me a traitor. She said I was supposed to love her unconditionally, even if she made a mistake. "But Ethan, I saw the logs you sent. I saw the dates. She didn't make a mistake, she made a series of calculated trades. She traded a good man for a shiny object, and now that the object is gone, she wants me to pay for the replacement." Linda told me she'd walked out of that studio apartment, while Megan was still mid-shriek. She told me she was changing her will and that she wouldn't be answering Megan's calls for a long, long time. "I'm so sorry, Ethan," she whispered. "I raised a daughter who thinks the truth is whatever she says it is. I'm ashamed." That was the ultimate validation. In my business, when even the primary stakeholders abandon a project, you know it's truly dead. Megan had spent 10 years building a facade of the perfect daughter and perfect wife. But her inability to account for the truth, the hard, cold data, had left her completely isolated. She wasn't just a divorced woman in a studio apartment, she was a ghost in her own family. It's been exactly 1 year since the boom moment on Bradley Holt's front porch. If my life were a factory, the retooling phase is officially over. The production lines are running at 98% efficiency, the overhead is low, and the noise, the emotional static that used to fill my days, has been completely filtered out. I'm sitting on the balcony of my new place downtown. It's smaller than the Colonial, sure, but it's high-tech, sleek, and entirely mine. There are no manufactured conflicts here. No butterflies for other men hidden behind face-down phones. Just peace. Last night, while I was preparing for a board meeting, my phone chimed. I've long since deleted her number, but I'd know that area code anywhere. Unknown. "I saw you got the senior director role. Congratulations. I'm working at a retail pharmacy now, it's not the same. I think about the house a lot. I think about the garden. Do you ever think about how happy we were before I got confused? I made a mistake, Ethan. A huge one. I'm so lonely. Please, just tell me you don't hate me." I looked at the message. I analyzed it like I would a faulty sensor reading. Confused. That was her final attempt to rewrite the data. She wasn't confused when she bought the lace lingerie. She wasn't confused when she moved into a mansion while I was still sleeping in our bed. She was just a bad actor who got caught in a failing system. I didn't feel hate. Hate is an expenditure of energy, and in operations, we don't waste energy on non-productive assets. I didn't reply. I didn't even block her this time. I simply hit the archive button and watched the message disappear into the digital void. She's just a line item in a closed ledger now. A historical data point. The truth is, Megan didn't want a break. She wanted a safety net while she jumped for something shinier. But she forgot that a net only works if someone is willing to hold the edges. I didn't just let go. I folded the net and walked out of the arena. I stood up, walked into my kitchen, and started grinding my morning coffee. The sound was crisp, the smell was rich, and the house was quiet. No anomalies. No glitches. Just a man who finally knows his own value, living a life that's finally, perfectly, optimized.